Hello, I've got another video today because saw that there was a lack of English videos that cover the Sony Walkmans. And particularly in this video, I'll be covering what I think about the differences between the 2012 Sony F800 and the 2013 Sony F880. Now, first off, what I have here is a blue Sony F800. It's the 16GB model, and beside it is the Sony F880. This is a black model, and you can tell this is the newer model from the high resolution sticker. And I've got another video of high resolution devices by Sony, the Sony ZX1. So if you haven't watched that video, go over and click the link. Now immediately what you can see is the Sony F800 and the Sony F880 is very similar in design. Well, they're only really 1 year apart from each other. But the Sony F880 is slightly, ever so slightly bigger than the Sony F800 in terms of its footprint, but it's thinner. And it doesn't have those strange angles that sort of make it hard to press the standby button. And what you do get is a more comprehensive set of keys. You have your volume buttons, change track and pause play. The Sony F800, you had, well, the volume rocker, but all of the essential music buttons were dedicated to a quick Walkman start button that activates on-screen keys, which wasn't particularly convenient when you were pocketing the device. Now, both constructions are very good, but the Sony F880 conforms more to the modern Sony Xperia phone designs that you might see, such as the Z1. Now, both are aluminium, and both include speakers. The Sony F880 speaker is actually hidden in the Sony logo, so I don't know if you can see this, but this is a speaker grill here, and it's flanked with a lot more nicer designs in my opinion. The headphone jack, it's a nice highlight there, and buttons are very accessible, and they feel good, very solid feeling. As I said before, the F880 isn't too bad in itself. Nice shiny logo. So without further ado, let's get started with booting the devices. Now, in terms of specs, the F880 is actually much faster than the Sony F800. Now, you might have seen that the F800 was faster in terms of loading. I can't quite explain that, but just general spec rundown, the F800 has 512 megabytes of RAM, 1.2 gigahertz single core. Versus the Sony F880 has 1.2 gigahertz, 1.5 gigahertz dual core with 1 gigabyte of RAM. The screen is actually much bigger compared to the F800, but generally I find both designs are quite good. They don't run too bad. I'm sure performance might chug a bit if you start stacking on a lot of these widgets and whatnot, but if you stick with the just the music functions, even the slightly slower or spec wise, the F800 will do very well. Now, getting into the more meaty side of the device and the user experience is the Android version. Yes, the Sony F880 runs on a newer Android version, 4.1.1, and the Sony F800 runs on a slightly older version, 4.04. But overall, I haven't noticed anything too different. But the most obvious difference is the Sony F800 runs with external capacitive keys that are separate to the screen, whilst the Sony F800 runs on the newer Google mandated on-screen buttons. Now getting into what really everyone should care about for Walkman is the music capabilities. Now once again, I can't quite demonstrate how sound quality is on a YouTube video. The most obvious thing is the hardware. With the Sony F880, we have the updated digital to analog conversion chip, the DAC, which features the Sony S-Master HX, which I've talked a little bit about in my ZX1 review. And the older Sony Walkman, the F800, runs on the Sony S-Master MX. The difference is the S-Master MX can only do 16-bit music, whilst the Sony S-Master HX can do 24-bit music files. And also, an obvious difference is DSEE. We have the updated DSEE HX versus the older DSEE. I suppose if you were to believe what it's supposed to do, the HX will update your lower bitrate MP3s or less than perfect bit ripped FLACs to a more presentable standard, better than the older DSEE. Other than that, your features are more or less the same, and what the difference is in terms of the end results for the user should be the sound quality. Now for testing sound quality, what I use is these, once again, my Sony XBA-H3 lovely earphones, and I've just played the same track straight from the headphone jack port of each Walkman and just quick switched my earphones from each player and kept playing the same bit of track on the same sound file. Once again, I thought I heard a bit of difference, but overall I'd probably conclude that they're both exactly the same. And I can sort of think why some people might think that the newer model will be better. You know, some quick variables that might happen is, once again, you know, people see a better, newer and more beautiful device. They want to hear a difference, so they will hear a difference in terms of their brain telling them so. And also, you can't be sure that the volume levels are exactly the same. I mean, sure, you could turn the volume levels to the same part of the sound bar, but because you're not getting the decibel reading, you can't be sure if they're the same volume. And you know, the F880 could have an improved amp that outputs more power to your earphones, and that tiny bit of sparkle to get that tiny bit of sound improvement could come from, you know, a very ever so slightly higher volume that could drive more detail into your ears. Another test I've done to ensure what I thought was more in the ballpark of what I'm actually hearing is I've outputted sound from both devices into a amplifier. What I have here is a Thea E17, and what I've done is I've lined out sound from the players to the amp, and what that does is isolate sound only from the DAC into the amp, so I can isolate the difference between both players, in that here we have, you know, the newer S-Master HX versus the S-Master MX, and the differences are due to the DAC and not the upgrades to the amp if the amps have been upgraded in each player. And for that, I have here, I think this is a Theo L7. This is just a specially designed Walkman port out to a 3.5mm jack, and that just slots into both players. At the bottom we have a Walkman jack port, and that just plugs in straight. And once again, I heard the same results as I did before. So in conclusion, is the newer Sony F880 better than the Sony F800? Well, that's a hard question, because, you know, on one hand, I do think the sound quality is exactly the same, but obviously here you have faster hardware and therefore better Android experience, which will improve your ability to consume media because you have access to better apps and a whole lot of other things you can customize on the Android side of the device. But in terms of a pure digital audio play experience, they are more or less the same. And when you take into consideration the price difference, 64GB model is roughly $250 versus 64GB model of the Sony F880 being around $400. Double the price, is that worth a slightly better Android experience? Well, I'd probably say no. But having said that, it's actually very hard to find the older model in the market right now, especially brand new, and this is very, very readily available. But if I had to only choose one, I'd probably just keep my older Sony F800. As of now, I actually use it as a small rig with my E17. I've purchased small adhesive, plastic adhesive, that just sticks to my Sony F800, as so, and I plug in the Sony port, as so. It's a nice compact rig, and you know, this is very, very cheap. This is a 16GB model. I bought this for under $100 used, and the E17 I bought about 2 years ago for $120. So what you have here is a $220 high resolution portable audio player. So hope you enjoyed my video, and please subscribe, because occasionally I do post up my thoughts about audio players or other electronic products. Thank you.